Welcome back. It's time for business, and I'm joined by Matthew Warren. Hello again, Matthew.
Hi,
now, of course, the east coast of the United States being battered by that Superstorm Sandy, and you're looking at the economic impact.
That's right, and of course it'll take days or even weeks for a really clear picture to emerge of what all this is costing in terms of clearing up this damage. And but an initial estimate by the University of Maryland says that it could be up to $45 billion that it costs overall. Well as that, the storm is causing real upheaval and havoc for many other parts of the economy.
New York City in lockdown, and the world's biggest stock markets are set to remain shut for a second day running. It's the first time in 27 years bad weather has forced them to close. The trading closure will lead to billions of dollars in losses and threatens to delay IPOs of at least 6 companies. Some firms have postponed their quarterly earnings reports, and banks closed branches in the storm-hit region. The US Labour Department could delay its latest unemployment report due on Friday. With 20% of the US population under threat and 4 of its major economic centres, New York, Washington, Philadelphia and Baltimore, in a virtual standstill, the superstorm deals a further blow to an economy that's already been struggling to gather pace. It's too early and difficult to give an accurate estimate of the economic impact of the hurricane, but it's expected to amount to tens of billions of dollars. Last year's Hurricane Irene caused at least $20 billion in damage, and Hurricane Katrina in 2005 led to a loss of more than $100 billion. One surprise impact of the natural disaster: oil prices. They fell as forced closure of refineries reduced demand in the world's largest oil consumer.
So stock markets in the US closed. What about over here in Europe? How are they looking?
Yes, European markets just opening, and opening slightly up actually. Some corporate news that is driving things up there. You can see across the board around 0.5% of increase. Also, I can tell you, Claire, news from Spain. This morning, the economy there shrank 0.3% in the most recent quarter. That was actually slightly better than expected. Also better than the previous quarter when it was down by 0.4%. Now, over in Asia, the Nikkei was actually up earlier in trading. That was on the hopes of some monetary easing by the Japanese central bank, but as you can see, they're down by almost 1%. The monetary easing did come through in the form of an 11 trillion yen bond buying program. That's about 108 billion euros, but market was a bit underwhelmed by that, as you can see there.
Moving on to a hint here in France that the 35-hour working week could be over.
Yes, that's right. But some mixed messages, perhaps. This 35-hour week, many business people would quite like to see the back of it. It was introduced 12 years ago by the socialist government then. Well, as you can see on the front of Aujourd'hui newspaper, Jean-Marc Ayrault, the Prime Minister, giving an interview, he said that when he was asked about moving back to a 39-hour week, he said, pourquoi pas? Why not? But then this morning on French radio, he has said, no, we're not looking to change it. So well, it'd be interesting to see what happens with that.
Why not doesn't seem like a very affirmative statement, does it?
Lack of clarity there.
All right, now some company news. Later this Tuesday, Italy's Fiat will announce its results.
Yes, and like several car makers, for example, Peugeot here in France, Fiat has been struggling with a bad market. Here in Europe, those latest results will be out at around 4 p.m. European time on Tuesday, well, as well as the numbers of particular interest in the home market of Italy will be any indication of whether Fiat plans to move all its production out of the country.
Giuseppe D'Alterio has been working at Fiat's Pomigliano factory for 23 years. He's currently on reduced pay and is worried about his future. The union representative is among some 2,000 employees on a temporary layoff as the plant shut down again for 2 weeks.
We're certainly disappointed. We were expecting car production to pick up again so we could go back to work. But the global economic crisis has slowed down that plan.
Fiat is among the European automakers hardest hit by the economic downturn. Car sales in the first 9 months of this year was down 7.6% in the EU compared with last year. In Italy, they were down more than 20%. The company is criticised for scrapping the so-called Fabbrica Italia project. In 2010, it promised to invest 20 billion euros to double production in Italy in exchange for concessions from unions such as flexible working hours. Yet Fiat's 5 plants in Italy are now operating at 50% capacity on average, the lowest level for any major car maker. It has opened a new factory in Serbia to make the flagship Fiat 500.
The Serbian government financed 50% of the project, which is something the Italian government cannot do. And labour costs are different. A Serbian worker makes €300 a month.
All eyes are on Fiat's latest earnings report due out on Tuesday, and on whether its CEO Sergio Marchionne will announce any further plans to abandon production in Italy.
Let's get some of the day's other company news. And the Swiss banking giant UBS has announced 9,000 job cuts. That represents about 15% of its workforce. The cuts were announced as the bank gave its latest results. UBS made a loss of €1.8 billion in the most recent quarter.
Some big changes at Apple. The man responsible for the mapping application on the new iPhone is out. The new app was criticised for a number of errors and misplaced towns when it was launched. Scott Forstall had been with the company since 1997.
And profits at the energy giant BP were up in the latest quarter. The company said earnings rose 7.7% to around $5.5 billion. That's led BP to increase its quarterly dividend by 12.5%.
Now, campaigning in the US is on hold for now, but of course it's in its final week, the vote taking place next Tuesday, and you've got some eye-popping figures on what it's cost the campaign.
That's right, Claire. It's an expensive business trying to win power in the US. I can tell you that the most recent estimate is $6 billion is being spent on promoting these candidates. Now, this comes from the two candidates' campaigns themselves, but actually more from these special political action committees, or super PACs as they are known in the US. They're very well funded. They can spend what they like as long as they don't coordinate with the official campaign. $6 billion, by the way, that's higher than the GDP of about 40 countries. Well, for some voters, all of this advertising, as you might expect, is getting a little bit tiring.
It's really hard to get away from ads. Sometimes the same candidate will have ads, multiple ads during like the same commercial break. So, it gets a little, I'm not sure how helpful it is at the end of the day.
It gets to the point where that's pretty much all I see sometimes. And it's also a little funny because I'll see one and then immediately afterwards I'll see another one that contradicts it. And then you just sort of don't know what to think. So I have gotten to the point where I don't really pay attention to them. It's kind of an overkill.
That's it for business. Thank you very much, Matthew, and thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.